I'm Tim Johnson from Agile Central. We try to have these forums every month or two, depending on scheduling and speakers available. And we try to do them that are topics that can help further the Agile transformation at the IRS. So we've had people from USPTO come in, USCIS, and we have Bob Payne here today from Lightspeed. He's got years of experience as an Agile coach. He's been here at the IRS. He worked on K2 for a while. I think one of the things he's probably most proud of is that he's the chair of Agile DC, helps set that up every year. Yep. It's a fantastic conference if you've never been, and it's cheap. That's one of the best things about Agile DC, in my opinion.
And local.
And local, and it doesn't cost a lot. Yep. So it's very good. The other thing I want to mention, then I'll turn it over to Bob, is the past 3 or 4 forums have all been external speakers. We welcome internal speakers, people that want to share their story, success they've had, with things Agile or DevOps oriented. Talk to us after the meeting, and we can, bring in an internal speaker too. Or if you know a good external speaker, we're always looking. Bob's presentation will be probably under an hour. Then we'll do Q&A at the end. So, any questions?
Yeah, his thing he's most proud of isn't that he doesn't work here anymore.
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Yeah, I took a liberty there,
I don't miss being on escort for 6 months. That's for sure. So welcome everybody. Today I'm going to talk a little bit. I want to lay out some things that are sort of aspirational, where I see government going. So I know you're in the mid to early stages of transformation. You have a number of programs that are going Agile. And I would like to say that Agile Teams are necessary, but not sufficient. So what I'm going to be talking about is this idea of focusing more on mission outcome and some of the things that I believe will need to change to be able to facilitate this. Now I call them the sparks because you may do some or all or hopefully not. I hope you don't do none of these. But they're not a structured framework. They're ideas about how we will need to move as an agency to enable being agile in our mission outcomes of the agencies. I'm going to talk specifically about budgeting and contract, portfolio Kanban, the Agile Value Management Office, and end-to-end value stream teams. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to be able to get through the other 3 topics, such as dynamic strategy, lean discovery, and DevOps deployment. This model has been sort of extracted and changed a little bit by me from our model for business agility sparks. It's a little bit different when we go from business agility to mission agility. Yes, ma'am?
You said about us as an agency. Are you talking about the IRS? You're talking about government? You're talking just in general?
So in that case, I was talking about the IRS. I know you're going through some transformation. There are many agencies that are increasingly utilizing agile methods. So my personal history with government is I was at USCIS for doing some work with Mark Schwartz, and specifically helped write the second management instruction for DevOps delivery with him.
What are agile methods?
So when we talk about agile methods, we're usually talking about Scrum or extreme programming or Kanban at the team level. And then generally at a larger program level, we may be talking about a scaled agile framework, either SAFe, Scrum at scale, or some of the other models that you will see. And those can include a lot of them have the same patterns of planning and executing across multiple teams within a program to allow those teams to be aligned for mission delivery as well. So a little bit about me. We had a slight introduction. Not only did I form the Agile DC conference, and I am very proud of that. It's a 4-benefit conference, so there are 3 primary benefits. One, I try to create a great one-day conference here in the DC region that is relatively cheap, under $200 if you get $175 for the early bird. We benefit speakers, allowing them to get more exposure of their ideas and hopefully move on to national conferences. And we also benefit the community. We're a for-benefit conference, and last year we donated $77,000 to various regional and national charities. So that's why I'm particularly proud of that. If you aren't sick of hearing me talk, I do have a podcast, the Agile Toolkit podcast. Now is the golden age of podcasts with really slick production. Mine is not that. It started in 2005, me showing up with a couple of microphones and chatting with people at conferences. This year, I'm also the co-chair of the Agile in Government track at the Mainline Agile Conference, which will be held in DC this year. A lot more talks, not cheap, but if you, I hate to steer you away from Agile DC, but you've got the main conference coming here to DC in August, so you may find that interesting as well. And I've been doing Agile and helping others do Agile for many, many years. We're lucky enough this year at Lightspeed to get some recognition from CIO magazine, so that was exciting. So I talked a little bit about some of the team-based methods, but let's just do a show of hands from 1 to 5. How much Agile knowledge do you have? And totally fine. Be honest. I'm sorry, I can't see your hands, folks, on the phone. So
you just want us to hold our fingers?
Well, yeah. So 5, you're an expert. 1, you haven't really done any yet or don't know much about it. Okay, a couple of 1s, a lot of 3s. 1, 3. Okay, so somewhere between 1 and 4, and I'm sure you've got some folks from Agile Central that here are experts as well. So I will try to talk about this model, and I will try not to use a ton of Agile buzzwords. I'm going to use some other buzzwords, but I'll try to keep the Agile to a little bit of a minimum. And again, I mentioned Scrum is currently the most popular Agile team-based method. When I was here, the majority of teams executing within the IRS that were doing Agile were using Scrum, sometimes augmented with Agile engineering and DevOps practices. So I'm assuming you've progressed over the past couple of years to an even better state, and I'm super excited about that. And again, we talked about those scaling methodologies. But what they all have in common is they allow teams, or teams of teams for a large program, to deliver something of value. Now, value is kind of an interesting thing. It's a lot more straightforward in a business context to say what value is. We're either saving money, earning a profit, acquiring customers, the things we would normally think of as value. So one of the things that I like to think about in any organization is, or any program that I'm in, what is the end value we're trying to accomplish? Because we're delivering on a project to be able to get whatever we're trying to build done, but ultimately we're not in the job of making widgets, building systems. Our job is to affect an outcome within the agency through the use of these systems and the tools.
Excuse me, it's too much noise, we can't hear anything.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Can I go on mute, please?
Asterisk 6 and mute it?
Yeah, what is it?
Asterisk 6.
Is there a way to mute everyone?
What is it?
Is there a way to mute everybody?
Your line is now muted.
This is better. Thank you.
No, it says our line's muted. But if you're happy with it.
Yeah.
Can you undo that?
I don't know.
Your line is now unmuted.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, we
All
realize
right,
that.
do you have us now? Yeah. Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So whatever methods you're using, whatever agile methods, in most cases Scrum, you're trying to deliver something from the team that is around value. But understand that value is only realized when it is in, if we're talking about an IT system, in production, capturing that outcome that we wanted, right? I know we have earned value, but honestly, that's an accounting trick. If we're there to streamline processing of a particular tax form, we don't really see that value until it is in production. And unfortunately, quite often we don't realize the value of the systems that we deploy. Microsoft, not too long ago, did a study, and it was a sort of a retrospective study across their suite of products, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. And what they found was that of the features that they had delivered over that time period, 1/3 added value, 1/3 were neutral, and what do you think the other third did? Yes, exactly. It removed value. It made the system harder to use or more cumbersome to get around. So one of the things that I'm going to be talking about is starting to think about how do we measure value as we create it, and how do we feed that back to better understand what to build. And some of the sparks are ways of thinking about that. So one of my favorite quotable people, W. Edwards Deming, he's considered to be one of the sort of grandfathers of Lean, along with Taiichi Ohno, working at Toyota, building the Toyota production system. And he said, learning is not compulsory, neither is survival. And why would I bring up a Lean quote here? Any thoughts?
To avoid the waste.
I'm sorry?
To avoid the waste.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things that Agile can do is it can allow you to deliver something quickly, but then we should get some feedback from how that's actually performing to learn what next to build, to learn about the product. And also, as with Toyota, to engage in continuous improvement, to learn about our processes and continually get better at delivering in the ways that we are endeavoring to deliver. If we happen to be using Lean or Agile practices, whatever that is. Now, what I quite often see is a very long feed-forward system. We have an idea, and then it may be months or years before we actually get whatever that thing is out into production. And unfortunately, that cycle is a little too long to learn. We've invested millions of dollars, possibly 18 months of time. And if we didn't get it right, we don't have a chance to go back and do a redo. So I'm going to be talking about some techniques along with Agile delivery that I'm hoping will help you realize the value and the mission outcome. Now, I'm not so when we're talking about Agile methods, we're really focused on the delivery box, the middle of this stream of value. But ultimately, we also, what are our requirements other than an idea, a hypothesis that says if we built this, we would get this outcome. So the idea is an unvalidated assumption. We're going to select them, build them, get them into production so that we can achieve mission outcome. When I worked at USCIS, Mark Schwartz said, and I don't know if you looked historically, they were really terrible customer service. It's gotten better. It's not amazing, but it would be months to get a green card replaced. It'd be like saying, I need to get my license replaced, and you go to the DMV. It's not great, but it's not as bad as it was at CIS. We'll set up a time to get your picture taken in about 2 months, and then come back. We'll get your address. We'll need some forms filled out, maybe another couple of months after that. It was taking 6 months to get those things replaced. So Mark Schwartz said, I'm not going to give you any money. We're not going to spend an ounce of money building something unless you can tell me that it will improve time to value for the people using Citizenship and Immigration Service, improve the ability of the adjudicators to do their job, and improve customer satisfaction both externally for citizens using this service or folks from other countries, and internally with the folks that work within USCIS. And you don't have to build software. If you come to me with a process change or a form change or a step that can be eliminated that will improve that mission outcome, great. I know I'm the CIO, but software is not the answer to everything. And he fundamentally said we've got to be able to ideate, we've got to be able to deliver quickly so that we can measure and learn how better to do this job. And they took their organization from multiple months, years of work to get stuff built, down to being able to make releases, regular governed releases from the Ellis program twice weekly. I don't know what their current cadence is, but that was their cadence when I was there. Okay, so we know we need to get better, and we need to be able to learn more quickly, and it has stopped. My clicker has stopped clicking. Okay, so unfortunately we're in what some people refer to as the VUCA world. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And we're not immune, this is absolutely true of the business world, and we're not immune from it in the government as well. Things change a little more slowly, but it's changing more rapidly than it would have 10 or 15 years ago. We've got to be able to adapt to that. Now, I know we didn't load the videos up, so I'm not going to. I will ask you to go out and look up John Cotter, the 21st Century Organization. I have it on my computer, but we don't have it here, so we'll have that be your homework from now on. So I'm going to talk about this idea of a transformational sparks. We've got another Deming quote, he said, your system is perfectly designed to get the results you're getting. So if you're late, if people are working extraordinarily hard to get releases out, if quality is low, if you don't have visibility into what's happening, your system is perfectly designed to get those results over and over again. His model was, if we're not getting the outcomes that we wish, we need to change the system. And in Deming's mind, the system was how we work together, processes, procedures, tools, communication, anything around the organizational dynamic of delivering value through that organization. And there are three fundamental shifts that I think need to happen. Yes, if we can't deliver anything, then that's where we have to start, right? So that's where all transformations start. Get some Agile teams up and running. But I've seen way too many Agile teams churning out on a long set of requirements that took months or years to get to them. Waiting for a big bang release when we're going to release it all at once. It's all or nothing. Guess what? When you have an all or nothing proposition, nothing is a real option. It's the one we ignore most of the time, but it is a real option. So we've got to get able to deliver, but once we do that, we're going to shift left into the business units, into the other parts of our agency to be able to identify valuable ideas and get them to the teams as rapidly as possible. We're also going to need to shift right out to DevOps, and I know there's been some movement in DevOps here at the IRS, and that's very exciting. The ability to reduce the risk of making small releases through automation, through and quite often DevSecOps is a more commonly used term now. They're just going to keep mashing things into that. It'll be biz dev sec ops at some point. I would be happy with that. And then we need to shift up to leadership, into our program planning, into how we fund these initiatives so that we can turn the crank that Agile will allow us. And yes.
What does leadership and scaling mean?
So we've got to move. Scaling is how do we take multiple teams, how do we scale it across the organization, how do we do large programs, and the leadership component there is how do we set up the management and governance structures so that we can have alignment, but we can also delegate some of that decision making down into programs that appropriately delegate that, so we know who's making clarity in decision making and visibility into progress. That's generally what we mean there. Yep. So one of the things that absolutely will need to change, I don't know whether you're running any experiments here. If you're interested, there are a number of different models that are being experimented with in the marketplace and in the government on how do we contract for Agile delivery. If we're fixed price, fixed scope, guess what? We get what we get and we don't get upset. We can't steer the system if we're fixed scope. We just fundamentally can't. If we identify something that would improve mission outcome halfway through the program, we may have to go through a convoluted, we may need to mod the contract. We've tied our own hands as the agency into getting what we thought we needed years ago. Now, obviously, we're able to do that, but you've got organizations like Innovation Lab to figure out what is the best way to procure Agile delivery and how, as an agency, do we make sure we're governing it well and not tying the hands of that agency moving forward. The Defense Innovation Board is kind of interesting because the DoD, right, they do some pretty serious systems integration programs, and they actually have a Defense Innovation Board, and they have what they call the 10 Commandments of Software and Detecting Agile BS, and I don't think that stands for business systems. And I'll just read a couple of things off that. So all software procurement programs should start small, be iterative, and build on success, or be terminated quickly. Part of their 10 Commandments. Budgets should be constructed to support the full iterative life cycle of software being produced with an amount proportional to the criticality and utility of the software. And on this, they gave different timescales for when you should see a small slice of the working system. For custom software, using Java or some other other language, they said within 2 weeks of program start. If you don't, then you're detecting some BS. If your firmware and software combined, they give you something like a month. Or if it's a COTS product, they give you, within the first month, you should start seeing slices of the working system. And they also had this paper called Detecting Agile BS. There's a product charter that lays out the mission and strategic goals. Do all members of the team understand both? And are they able to see how their work contributes to both? And this means everybody on the program, testers, BAs, certainly the leadership of the program. If not, if they don't understand what the outcome is that they're trying to contribute, that might trigger their BS detector. Is feedback from users turned into concrete work items for sprint teams on timelines shorter than 1 month? If not, might be Agile BS. And are teams empowered to change the requirements based on user feedback? Now, when they're talking about teams, they're not talking about just the contractors changing requirements, talking about empowered product management, product ownership within that team, or with a rapidly able to get those decisions made. Do we do this? Looks like it's going to be good. Yes, great. Let's execute. If no, then we can at least know about that quickly. And there are some links there to both of those if you're interested. And they have some other things. This is a screen capture from the PDF that they've released. They also talked about the need to be able to budget and contract differently. And as I mentioned, there are lots of experiments that are being run in multiple organizations. You've got to be able to adapt to the realities of your mission. It's all about adjusting how people and money are being utilized. And I think that is impossible with a yearly budgeting cycle, because it assumes, and it's not like we don't start that year with many months of planning before that. So we're looking 18 months out, knowing what the future will be. I don't know about you, but even with my family, I can't predict out more than a few days as to what's going to be going on.
Sir,
Yes.
we need to clarify that because the DoD's got a 2-year budget cycle, the IRS has got a 1-year budget cycle.
Yeah.
And you have to have a beginning and an end scope somehow to get funding.
Yes. And one of the shifts that I see many agencies looking at is funding outcomes, not necessarily funding the scope, and setting metrics targets on that.
You're supposed to be doing that already, though.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Yep. I find that I don't find that to be universally true among the agencies that I see.
Thank you.
Yep. So fund agency outcome, not scope. Adjust branch and program allocations on a quarterly basis if you can. Contracting. Probably going to need to experiment with different strategies and work with your cores. Learn from other agencies. Some of the models are performance-based, so rather than just taking the folks that can write the best RFP, have them bring a team, not just of superstars that won't show up on your program, but real people that are going to be on your program. Have them build something in a finite time frame to prove that they can work in the way they say they're going to work. Outcome and behavioral-based contracts. At one of the experiments that was run at USCIS had a clause in the contract that said you'll be evaluated on a monthly basis, and one of those clauses was obviously delivering quality code.
Participant, for a menu of available commands, press star.
But also, how well are you communicating and collaborating with your federal partners, which should be a given, and other contractors? Because that's where I see a lot of problems when there are multiple contractors. Everybody's trying to undercut folks. So they put in a clause that said they were going to be evaluated on a monthly basis. And they had a period of performance that was 6 months, where they could, without triggering any protest, add or remove teams from any given contractor. They let 4 contractors, and then the ones that were performing better, they added teams, and they had the sledgehammer of being able to reduce teams as well. I don't think they ever executed on that, at least when I was there, they had not. Let multiple awardees and adjust allocation based on small task orders. Tech challenge strategy, that's the one that I talked about, where you have a team come in and actually deliver some working software. Contract for a full stack delivery team. And by that, I mean, if you're doing a DevSecOps, you've got testers, you've got ops folks, you've got the developers, able to deliver, and analysts as well, able to work with the federal partners and deliver end to end. Because we want to be able to, we don't want sort of political boundaries happening or contractual boundaries between development and, say, your IV&V team. Include agency outcome, collaboration, quality clauses for reviewing awardees. I know that sounds a little squishy, but it is a critical factor in being able to deliver in a transparent way. We've got to be able to have people working together in good faith. Okay. One of the things that some organizations, and I haven't seen this in the federal space yet, but I certainly see it in, I've seen some things that were similar. This idea of a value management office, it takes that project management office, and rather than focusing on delivering the project, you're focused on delivering those mission outcomes, and that's where those key metrics are. I can be green on scope, green on schedule, green on budget, and still deliver the wrong thing. I've seen way too many projects that were green all the way through, but we didn't get the outcome, that return on that investment that we had hoped. And what the focus of the value management office is, certainly we want to look at schedule and scope and budget. We also want to make sure that we have a steering group with linking pins into this Agile VMO and link to the project team, and that they focus on the flow of value. How rapidly can we take an important idea, get the details required, Agile requirements or user stories or a feature map, get that built, get that into production, and then measure if we're moving in the right direction with outcome. An example that I use from CIS was they had a few different ideas about how they could improve the adjudicator's ability to do their job. And what they ended up doing is they would build small features, release it to a small subset of the adjudicators, and see if it actually reduced their time to look at a particular case or improve their ability to do the job. If it did, it got rolled out to the entire organization. If it didn't, they would tweak it and try to figure out why didn't it move the needle, and maybe they would just kill that whole idea. Because they had assumptions about how they can make their lives easier, but until you actually see it moving the outcome, it can't be positive. The other thing that we want, so we're managing the flow of value across the entire portfolio. So that's sort of the program planning model that you see in many agile scaling models. Managing the flow of value and enabling continuous learning and measuring the performance towards outcomes rather than just measuring output. If you want to maximize output, I can build a lot of stuff. In fact, if it doesn't need to work, I can build, it's already done. I built a whole bunch of stuff, right? Output is never the goal. Yes, we need to be able to deliver some output, but outcome is always the key measure of success. And putting this structure in place can help with that. Now, where I saw this was in an O&M model at USCIS. They essentially had a steering committee, value management office that looked across all of the systems. It used to be systems had owners. So, like, I'd have a certain amount of budget to build stuff that I wanted, but we weren't looking agency-wide to say what is most important to fix. And I'm sorry, Bob, you don't get yours.
I'm on listen to this conference call on the other phone that you just dialed on.
My apologies.
Hello.
Excuse me, could you go on mute, please?
Yep.
We can hear you.
So they had to balance across those different streams of work that needed to be delivered in that operations and maintenance team. And they use something very similar to Value Management Office. What is most important for the agency or the branch? And it may be...
Question?
Yeah.
At the program or project level, couldn't you just establish a value realization framework?
Absolutely.
And you'd
Yeah.
use it for maybe some of your smaller projects?
Yeah. And the other thing that you quite often see is not every thing that you're building in a given project. One of the things that I see some of these VMOs or planning groups that work like this, they may unbundle the project, do the super important stuff across multiple projects before moving on to those nicer to haves, rather than execute entirely one project, then bring another project in, then bring another project in. You're focused where is the greatest value across these 5 projects or however many they have in the program. They are that gate in that funnel. There is more work out there than you can deliver in your program. That's just, when you find yourself not in that situation, you'll be a rare bird. There's always more stuff to do than we possibly have time or money for. So the VMO is all about selecting which are the things that we believe will actually move the needle. Getting them built, and then use feedback and continuous learning to say, are we achieving that outcome? And one of the ways that we see teams in these VMOs or Agile programs operating is they'll actually embed discovery into the program. So there are always things that we're not absolutely sure whether we need to build or exactly how to build. And we want to be able to start building those things that we know, that we do know. So we're going to have some ongoing discovery happening. And quite often those involve experiments, going and interviewing people in field offices to try to figure out we know we have this outcome, how are we going to build it? So you probably need to embed some level of discovery in that VMO as well. Experimentation and continuous improvement is a critical way of sussing out those things that might make a big impact, but you don't actually know. So a lot of these VMOs will also embed some level of user experience or innovation experimentation, Google design sprints, lean startup models to improve their ability to select from that sea of work that's out there and figure out what is actually important. And rather than building it, is there an experiment we could run, maybe a prototype or a paper passing exercise or interviews that could validate that it would actually be valuable? We could go on our assumption, our first idea, that it was valuable, or we could figure out how can we test it, because it's expensive to build the wrong thing, not only in real money, but in opportunity costs. It's time we could have been spending building something else. One of the things that we're seeing more and more of is this idea of end-to-end value stream teams. And I'll use a commercial example for this because we see it happening very heavily at organizations like Capital One. And I would say the Ellis program at CIS was also one of those end-to-end value stream teams. Now, on a big program, we've got lots of folks that are involved. We've got our IT group. We have the business leaders. We've got users, field office folks. And one of the problems that we've traditionally had is we've got all of these silos. And to get something done, we usually do some work in one silo, hand it off to another, hand it off, hand it off, hand it off. And what a value stream team is. So in that case, we're hard-lined, right, if you think about an org chart. We're solid line to our silo, and we're dotted line to the value delivery. And increasingly, what we're seeing is organizations saying, yeah, we have folks from IT and folks from business and folks from the testing organization, but they're solid line to the value. We get them together, we keep them together as a product and value delivery team, and they're dotted line to their silos. So at Cap 1, they're funding entire streams. And in fact, we've seen organizations like, I think their name was Skynet at Business Agility. They're embedding HR professionals in their value stream teams. Why? Because my HR needs might be different than someone else's HR needs, because we're hiring for different skills. Sorry. So what we're seeing happen more frequently now is turning this on its side and creating value stream teams that stay relatively persistent. Who here can see in a future where you won't be collecting taxes at the IRS? Okay. And that was the same realization that the folks on, when are they going to stop developing IT systems to support commercial line credit or personal line credit? Not going to happen. So what they did is they said, we're going to fund this end-to-end value stream team in scaled agile framework. This is just called a release train, or multiple release trains. And we're going to keep them together for the most part. Obviously, you've got contracting laws where you're going to be rotating folks in and out, but you would at least keep folks focused on that value stream delivery because of all of these silos. And we generally don't even have real business representation in many of these. That's happened before, and now we're only dealing with dev, test, QA, and operations. So this was actually from the Cutter Consortium. Sanjeev Augustine and Roland Cuellar wrote this idea up then, having a standing team and bringing the work to the team. The analogy I like to think about is, can you imagine a professional sports team that said, we've got a game on Sunday. Does anybody have a quarterback? Okay, we got a quarterback. Does anybody have a kicker? No, all the kickers are allocated. Does anybody's kid play soccer? Maybe we can pull a kicker from that. You would never blow up the team and reform it for every single game, and yet we quite often do that with projects. Oh, we've got a project, let's get a team. What end-to-end value streams or standing teams do is they say, we're going to get through that forming, storming, norming into the performing range, and we're going to leave the team mostly together and bring the work through those teams.
Yeah. I was driving down there, so okay, when I get my money back on.
Hey guys, we can hear you in the room. Sorry. So what I'm seeing more and more organizations move to is essentially getting all of those things, those end-to-end teams where we have product management, we have business and budgeting and executive leadership. We've got some level of innovation engine in there to discover what are the next most important ideas in this thing we're delivering. And then refining, delivering, and ultimately measuring. If we don't measure outcome, we're driving blind. It is like spraying shaving cream on the inside of your windshield and just barreling down 66, right? We need to measure. We can't manage what we don't measure. So one of the things that we've seen, and it has gotten a lot better in the DevSecOps world, we've got these great tools for measuring outcomes. When people come to me with a new feature, I quite often ask the product management team in that company, how will you know it delivered value? And is there any way you can instrument it as you build it so you can measure to make sure that it's actually doing the job that you want it to? And then quite often you need to...
I have a question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Before you further for the value stream
Yep.
team. So the different teams are there.
Yep.
How do they work on value stream mapping? They work together or they're separate on individually? That's the first question.
Yeah, the value stream mapping is usually done organizationally because you've got to figure out where your value streams are and where you want to put standing teams. So I could imagine a case where the teams come. This is across multiple Agile teams at nationwide, and these are essentially not quite project size, but maybe next layer down epics that are or large feature sets from those larger projects that they've decomposed and are mapping that through till eventually they get to the team. So sometimes they track minimally marketable features or minimally deployable value chunks. Like Apple Pay was a classic one that they decoupled out of a larger project and ran through individually. They might track defects, risks, and technical debt. So or business process debt through this, so that they can bring that down to the teams and do it effectively. And they visualize it, and this is a working session around this board. Now there are electronic versions that they use as well, but they just happen to be using that in their value stream team. Portfolio Kanban. Kanban is a lean term that essentially it is a way of either pulling work through the system or visualizing a single piece of work from end to end, from idea to implementation. A lot of folks are looking at measuring that value stream. Had a team, Task Top, gave a really good talk at the Business Agility Conference. And for that group and for the nationwide group that they were working with, they were tracking features, those things of value that need to be delivered by these value streams. Risks, security and compliance, how do we burn that risk down? Defects, quality improvement, and any improvement that needs to be made to the infrastructure or architecture so that we can continue to deliver rapidly. One of the things that I quite often see is we build something really quick, we take on some debt, and we never pay that debt down. So especially those hot fixes that I see release, the duct tape, spit, baling wire. We never go back and pay those off. So in Portfolio Kanban, you need to visualize that and make sure that you're doing that effectively as well. It requires end-to-end agility. We certainly need integration across all of the IT delivery teams and the business teams to be able to effectively do that. So we've got intake, dropping work down onto team-funded backlogs and pulling it through, discovery, refining it, getting it on the team backlog, delivering it, and then measuring those outcomes. So, and there's certainly there's super high level overview. If you're interested in the business agility paper, that I've taken some of these ideas to sort of start to craft this idea of mission agility sparks. You can download that there. But we at least had 50, 60, 70,000 foot view of Agile BudgetingContracting, Portfolio Kanban, Agile Value Management Office, and this idea of standing up end-to-end value stream teams. And what I'd like to do is I would love to answer questions and talk about your issues you're having and how I've seen other folks.
So if you could go back to what
They all
Hey, people on the phone go on mute. Thank you, you're interrupting the entire conference.
So that's the bottom part. How is this essential, safe? If not,
To
then
place
how is
all
it?
participants in broadcast
It's
mode,
very close
press
to essential
1
safe.
to begin a voting and polling session.
Now,
3 to change your
if
host
you look at the
password.
scaled
Press
Agile
4
framework,
to change entry and exit options for future
Dean
conferences,
Leffingwell,
press 5 to end future
explicitly
conferences. After the host
interviewed
disconnects,
large
press
Agile
7 to
programs
place
and
all
pulled in
participants in listen-only
the
mode.
current
Press
practices
8
they
to
were
place
using.
all
So all of these
participants
things
are
are
now
not
in
unique,
listen-only mode.
To the Scaled Agile framework. All of these things were already being executed in other organizations in their homegrown, Scaled Agile, right? So we see patterns like, the value stream teams or Agile release trains in Scrum at Scale, Nexus, the LESS, and disciplined Agile delivery. So the same patterns exist in all the scaling frameworks.
So do we have PI planning in this framework?
Sure. Yep. But you also have cross-program planning in Scrum at Scale, and that's a regular cadence as well.
So cadence and synchronize also there.
Yep, absolutely. And in 2001, when we did our first large program with extreme programming, which was an Agile method that was popular in the early 2000s, we essentially said we're going to plan together, we're going to integrate and demo every sprint. We're going to have a linked Scrum of Scrums. We didn't call it Scrum of Scrums because I hadn't been influenced by the Scrum framework yet. So, at that point in 2001, we had to invent it because you were trying to coordinate across several hundred people on that program.
Last question.
Yes.
Does this framework covers what SAFe is suggesting 10 essential items?
So, we're not really considering a prescriptive framework.
Okay.
Right? We're sort of laying out ideas that you could implement in many different ways. One of the things that I see happening in the SAFe framework is it was very focused on IT in particular, and that's really partially because Dean's an IT guy. And that's great. He brings that perspective, but ultimately, if we're delivering the wrong thing a little more efficiently, that's great. That's a starting place. But ultimately, unless we really work out into the business, unless we really talk about how to make the organizational structure more agile and be able to use this engine more effectively, that's where real in business competitive advantage or in an agency where you be able to innovate and better able to capture those mission outcomes. So I would say yes, I see inklings of it there, but most people just plop it in to fix IT and can help there. But, yes, sir.
What do you say to organizations who kind of want to jump into scaling frameworks without really having practiced the team on this stuff first?
You can't scale bad teams. Right? If you can't deliver in a single team effectively, you're creating a lot more work and a lot more noise when you try to do it across many multiples of teams. So my preferred strategy is to start with 1 or 2 small teams, get that working effectively, work out any governance bugs, get them working well together, and then you can start to scale as you go. Now, that's an iterative incremental approach to scaling. There are times when a big bang implementation is necessary, and that's when you've got extraordinary risk and you know you can't deliver in the old way. So when I talked about that 2001 large-scale engagement that we had at a financial services organization, it was stabilization recovery. They had board-level visibility, and when somebody in charge of a program has to walk up to Congress or walk in front of the board, people get very uncomfortable. So they were facing cancellation. So in that case, it was appropriate to do a big bang implementation, but it also meant a ton more support. So lots and lots of coaching, consulting necessary to keep the rails on, because a lot of things are changing at once, and it's easy for that to sort of spiral out of control. So it's expensive, it's risky, it may be the appropriate response if you're in an existential crisis. Is that helpful?
You can make the presentation available?
Yeah, so I don't know how it's going to be distributed, but there's a PDF, and maybe you can...
Yeah, we'll get it out to everyone. We'll get the video that was in there too. We'll send it as well.
Great.
Actually, a follow-on question. So
Oh,
I
sorry.
saw the flyer about the seminar, and there's a link to the Agile Center. There's no information about the dial-in. Where is the information being distributed? Through some special meeting list?
Yeah, we have like a coaching list. So if you've got the invite and you want on future invites, just reply and ask to add you to the list, and we'll add you to the list.
And if we did get an invite?
You can send us. So here you go.
Yeah. So I'll give you an email address in just a second.
So
Yes, sir.
The question is, there's a couple things we need. We need a platform to start, managing this agile process. We need to train people. But let's say they're not even having a daily stand-up. It sounds like if we implement a daily stand-up, it might be too aggressive, but we have to do it in an incremental fashion. Maybe have a weekly stand-up and get the team doing that. And then, how do you address people that are pushing back to those stand-ups on a frequent basis?
Trying to be as diplomatic as I can, which is not really my strong suit. So I think there's a baseline discipline that needs to be in place for the teams to get good. I think I am certainly not dogmatic, so that if a team finds they can be effective with a weekly stand-up, I would want to sort of have them show me how they have been effective, right? Before you start to move to a weekly stand-up. It is not that onerous to be on a 15-minute coordination call, especially if you have timelines that are on the order of 1 to 3 weeks. Honestly, I've seen daily stand-ups on waterfall programs when they near the end, because there's so many things moving. So
it's just a process.
Yeah, it is. And that being said, I think some people are extraordinarily dogmatic about Scrum or Scaled Agile Framework or anything else. When we looked at W.E. Demings from Lean, he was not dogmatic about anything other than the outcomes. You'd constantly experiment with different ways. So if a team comes to me and says, we've measured that we are more effective doing whatever they're doing, using a Ouija board for estimation, I don't know what they're doing, but if they show me the data, that is a team I want to work with. They're already thinking about how they can measure their own improvement. I see way too much sloppy Scrum, and you can't, without discipline, you can't deliver in waterfall. Without discipline, you can't deliver in any methodology. So I think being professional and being disciplined about working in the way we say we're going to work and engaging in continuous improvement to get better at working as a program, that's a necessary prerequisite for really effective teams. And I saw another hand or two. Yeah.
I said the last question, but I have one more question. So going back to,
just one more question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Going back to your 3 dots,
Uh-huh.
you mentioned that the organization were doing just fine, they were investing everything, but still they failed.
Right.
So as an expert like you, what would be your suggestion to those teams to get succeed? 3 point, 5 point, 1 point?
I'm sorry, I'm missing that.
When you said those dots,
Yeah, so this was
so you're
scheduled scope and
mentioning that
budget.
They failed.
Right.
What is your suggestion an expert for those teams to get succeed and not to fail?
Become disciplined and understand where you are in that schedule. I see highly effective Agile teams. In fact, some of the if you look at the version 1 survey or some of the more statistically significant stuff from quality software metrics, what we see is that folks using Agile are actually a little better able to manage scope, schedule, and budget. Like if I can demo every 2 weeks a working system, the ability to release on some date is not hard, right? The question is, will I have all the scope in there, right? And getting short feedback loops on are our estimates good? Quite often we don't know until the end of a waterfall program if things are starting to blow up. We're like, shoot, our estimates weren't good. Here we get feedback every 2 weeks if we're able to estimate. And if we aren't, guess what? Our plan is crap regardless, right? If we can't estimate, we can't have a decent plan. And that was true of waterfall as well. So I think it gives you data early, and you ignore that data at your own peril, right? If you see that we're not delivering every sprint what we thought we needed to hit the date, it's just magical thinking to think you'll pull it out at the end, right? That they call it a Hail Mary pass because they usually don't land, right? you only land that throw every so often. It's spectacular when it happens, but it's odds are against it. Oh.
So we have a question online.
Okay.
Other than driving to outcomes versus outputs, where do you see integration of multiple scrums into common platforms?
Yeah, I'm afraid. I don't know if there's any way to get clarification on that. Okay.
Highlighted.
Yeah. So I see lots of organizations that have multiple Scrum teams working by common platforms. I'm assuming we're talking about like enterprise service buses or data centers, and they may be focused mostly on those output. So I think you can get better at delivering output via Agile and via some of the scaling techniques. And I think that's necessary but not sufficient. And I think moving towards more outcome-based measures are where I actually see. When I talk about Scrum and multiple Scrum teams, there is not a problem that I have seen that you can't apply some of those solutions to. There are teams and organizations where it's not going to work, but we have Saab builds the fighter jet, the Saab Gripen. They use a Scrum at scale framework across 2,500 engineers. They have daily stand-ups that link and escalate problems on a daily basis from an engineer in a team all the way up to the executive action committee. And here we're not talking about software. We're talking about engines. We're talking about weapon systems. We're talking about avionics. So when you're looking at a systems integration problem that complex, to say we couldn't do it in the software world is just one of those non-starters for me because I've seen it everywhere. Now, why the heck would Saab use multiple Scrum teams on this fighter jet platform? Their simple answer was they sell to many, many of the NATO countries, and they can turn around a new model of that aircraft for for a country that has a particular mission they want to execute on in 6 months. You can't do that with waterfall in a fighter jet systems integration program. So they use Scrum. Because anything that's delaying one engineering team for even a couple of days risks that 6-month turnaround on a new fighter jet. And so they get lots more orders than, say, some of the other fighter companies around the world.
How would you do things differently for just managing a program management office as far as can you do the discovery, refinement, and everything else doing just your normal processes? Do you still look for your value? What value items does that PMO want to do?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about development. I'm
Right.
just talking about normal running everyday program management office.
Probably-
Everything around here all seems to be agile for development.
Right.
I'm talking just for functions.
The most important thing you can do at that PMO level is to unbundle things from the projects and get the most important things fed down into the teams as quickly as possible. So smaller batches, because quite often what happens is you go through the refinement till you have the entire scope defined, and then it gets handed over to the team. So
You would still have your backlog, more or less, of all the priorities that the PMO needs to get done, not development related.
Right.
All the documents, all the other stuff, and then you still run through the same, what's your highest value, get those done first, and then...
yes, and for some of those governance documents that will be handed over when the entire thing is done or as a part of the system as record, build those up incrementally rather as you're executing on those particular value things down into the team. So,
Do you have teams as well between, say you have a couple of groups in a PMO? Would you have a team with members from each group that would be together to go ahead and say, okay, this is what our value is, so as a PMO you can have an overall value?
I have seen that in a number of places, and that can be helpful. Because that small team, they're not focused on boiling the ocean. They're focused on this program or these few projects within that program. So part of the system that gets set up when there's a little more agile is you've got this idea of sort of the 3 pillars of Scrum, or transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So we do see this idea of visualizing the flow of value through the PMO, or the flow of value through development teams, as a way of managing that and measuring from the time it hits, when do we get it out the door. So shortening that time to value is one of the things that I see some folks looking at. Could we take this important information, get it through in a timely fashion? One of the interesting studies that Nationwide did, they did that value stream analysis, and they have been doing Agile at scale. They've got 250 Agile teams just in IT, and they've been doing it since 2007 when we stood up their first 6 teams. And when they did the final end-to-end value stream analysis for one piece of value, so let's say it's Apple Pay or something like that on their mobile platform, what they found is there on the business side, there's a business planning cycle before it even gets to the PMO. They would need to bundle that up with other stuff to make it project worthy, right? Because we've got the funding exercise that we need to go in to get that in. They want to drop into their, they have a intermediate planning group that takes it from the business, does some more planning, and it looks a bit more like PMO. So they would try to get it on a roadmap. We're going to execute on this project sometime in Q2, and then that would drop down into a Scrum team and then be batched up with all the other things of the project for a big bang release, because that's the way they were taking the release. And then, so they measured the amount of work time for that single piece of value flowing through the system, and they measured the percentage of time that was spent in this design, build, test, deploy phase. And even though they're highly skilled Agile teams, does anybody have a rough guess as to what touch time they had, or the amount of time, the percentage of time they spent building that when it finally hit IT? I know you don't know, so just give me a random guess.
Come on, 50%.
By percentage.
10%.
Way too high. 1.5%.
Wow.
And they did that across multiple single items to get that percentage. So, and what is their big complaint? IT is too slow. So they started shifting to end-to-end value stream teams that include members of the PMO, members of the business, all the way through to deployment. So their next phase of Agile work at Nationwide is to say, look, we've already gotten pretty efficient at building stuff, and now the bottleneck is not here. It has moved. So just doing some of those time to value metrics can be really helpful.
Yeah, and even on the most agile projects at the IRS, that's true. They're very efficient in the delivery cycle, but they're spending 6 to 9 months up front doing discovery, PMO level stuff.
And never let perfect get in the way of better, right? You pull that down to 3 months, that's a big help. What they found now is they're for something of value, they're down from idea to implementation around the 1 month mark in those end-to-end value streams. That could be a really effective way to move the needle. Did you have a question or online question?
Online question, yeah, from Chris. Should you decide on measures for each stage of flow, or have a big overall measures for the entire program?
Honestly, if I had to pick one, I would pick the mission outcomes as the primary measure of success. Because one of the things that you see is they use metrics to get very efficient in their IT space, but that's a local efficiency. It's not the flow of idea all the way to the end. So now, I say that knowing that some of the local improvements to be able to shorten that time to value across the whole value stream are going to be driven by those local metrics. But, team velocity or the percentage of rollover can be helpful to the Agile team, but that doesn't tell me how we're doing, we're setting ourselves up for the 2020 tax season, right?
But you said if you had to choose one, so that
it would be mission outcome.
But it makes it sound to me like you would do a combination, or not. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm interpreting it, so.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think the only one that's important is the measurement of mission outcome. So that's why I have to start there.
But these will help you understand, because you just said, hey, it's still too long, but we show you right here that we've made our efficiency, so you got to look someplace else.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So they can help drive where you need to make those changes.
Here's the thing about metrics. They're extraordinarily important for changing sort of the hearts and minds and affecting organizational change. This great quote, I can't attribute it. I think I read it in a book or heard it in a podcast, or I don't know where I stole it from. So I just, let's be clear. I'm saying this without attribution. The quote was from a leader that said, "Come to me with data and we'll discuss your opinion. Come to me with an opinion and we'll use my opinion." Right? So now it doesn't always guarantee that data is persuasive, right? We've seen cases where the data is not persuasive, but that's just a political reality that we have in organizations sometimes. But data is your friend. If you can say, look, we had this thing that was blocking us. It was infrastructure, and it took. We can't bring folks onto the program because everybody's on escort, or they're certainly personal pet peeves that I had from my time here.
Can't get a laptop.
What's that?
Can't get a laptop.
Yeah. Yep. Can't get a laptop.
Tim's got a few of those.
Yeah. The good news for the stuff I was doing, I didn't need to access any of the internal systems. But if you've got a developer that can't get a laptop, I don't know what you do, right? Pen and paper is not that effective in coding.
Okay. And we're going to order more mute buttons for people so that they can use their phones next time.
A big that's easy, or figure. I could never figure out the massive mute.
Like the big red staple buttons.
Yeah.
That's very exactly.
Other questions, thoughts, concerns? Agile DC will be September 23rd this year. It's at the Kellogg Conference Center in DC. Gallaudet, yep.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.